Yes, I was not expecting divorce to be the center of my universe, but after close to 20 years of marriage that was failing, I finally got the nerve to ask for a divorce. And it took me years and years to do that because I had a son and I didn't want to emotionally scar him. So I put it off and tried not to get the divorce. And we went to couples counseling and I tried therapy. And finally, my son was showing signs and symptoms. He was getting tension headaches and other things that were showing that he was being affected by the conflict in our home. And ultimately, I said, we need to have a divorce. And I knew that it was going to be the most traumatic experience for me and my son, as well as my husband. And breaking the news to my son was very, very difficult. And ultimately, I created a very unusual and program for breaking the divorce news to him, which turned out to be very successful. And then my ex and I learned how to co-parent, and we did it well. We raised my son, who was 11 at the time of the divorce, to adulthood. And one day when he was in his early 20s, literally out of the blue, he came to me and he said, "You know, Ma, you and Daddy did a really good job with your divorce. And I just want to thank you because most of my friends whose parents divorced either hate their parents or are very angry at them. And I think you guys were great." And I just let out such a sigh of relief because I was holding on to so much anxiety and insecurity about, did I mess my child up, and what was he going to say to me when he was grown. So this was like such an important moment, and it literally became the catalyst for my deciding that I had enough to share with other people, that I founded the Child-Centered Divorce Network, became a divorce and co-parenting coach, and created several ebooks and e-courses and programs to help parents through all the stages and steps of divorcing and co-parenting when you have children.
What are some of the big kind of mistakes? I mean, obviously there's, lots of things that could go wrong, but what are some like really big, obvious,
Yes,
don't do
yes,
these things?
this is so important, and it's far too common. And unfortunately, it doesn't have to be this way. But conflict has been proven to be one of the biggest challenges for children of any age, and whether they're in an intact married family or a divorced family. Having conflict, fighting around the kids really negatively harms them emotionally, psychologically, physically. It's just something that gives them great problems. And it's something that you don't have to do. That means not only not fighting in the same room, but not fighting on the phone when the kids are in the other room with the door closed. You just want to keep your conflict away from kids. If you could avoid with that one thing alone, it's a gift to your children. Another equally harmful mistake is demeaning, disparaging, putting down that child's other parent around the child, to someone else that you're talking to on the phone, a friend or a neighbor who's stopping by, and you're talking badly about your child's other parent, your co-parent.
Mm-hmm.
Children innately love both parents, even if both parents aren't good parents. They love them, and they don't want to be caught with having to defend or support one parent over another. It puts them in a very uncomfortable position,
Mm-hmm.
an unnecessary position. So you may feel very correct and right, and in having great judgments and anger and hatred for your ex, but it doesn't mean you can justify it. And it doesn't mean that your children need to hear it. Vent to your friends, vent to a therapist or a divorce coach, but don't vent to your children, and don't make them feel bad for loving the other parent, because they just do. And when they're concerned about things like this, they're also worried about, are you ever going to stop loving me like you stopped loving my daddy or my mommy?
That's a really, really good point. And they just don't have the emotional capacity to deal with that, do they?
No, they don't. Not at all. Children, even teens, don't have the emotional capacity to understand the complexities of a divorce, which leads me to another very important mistake that we see too often, and that is using your children as confidants. It's so tempting to say, if daddy wasn't an alcoholic, if mommy didn't have an affair, we wouldn't be having this divorce. It makes sense to want to share that with the kids, but it changes who they are when they're privy to adult information, because they can't fix your problems. If they could, life would be much simpler. We can't fix our problems, let alone letting our children have to do it. And so they're dealing with something that they can't do anything about. And once a child knows adult information, they can't unhear it, they can't unlearn it. It changes who they are, and it turns them into little adults before their time, because innately they want to help mommy or daddy fix the problem, which leads us to another related mistake, and that's turning your child into a confidant, where you're sharing information and letting them know how hurt you're feeling. Again, talk to your friends, talk to a therapist, a coach, a family member when you're hurt and feeling badly. But don't cry to your children and turn them into your parents. We need to be parenting our kids at all time. It's not their place to parent us. They don't know how to parent us. It isn't fair, but it forces them to try to be the little adult in the family. Mommy, it's okay. I'm going to take care of you. It's not their place to do that. And again, it robs them of the innocence of childhood. Kids, even kids of divorce, deserve to have fun and a childhood. And as parents, it's our responsibility to be there to monitor those things and make sure we're there for them every step of the way. Other mistake that I do want to bring up is, don't ask your kids to be passing messages along between homes. It's so easy to say, tell daddy I'm going to be an hour late on Friday. Now that child can forget the message, mix the message up, confuse it with something else, or intentionally give the wrong information because the child is already taking sides with one of you or the other. Regardless of what it is, it's not a child's responsibility, even a teenager, to be monitoring your scheduling, your changes, and the in-betweens between parents. Use a co-parenting tool online. They're very inexpensive. Text, email, whatever you need to do, but to have a resource for that where you're not putting the burden on your children. Again, keep adult information as much away from children as possible, and you're preserving the childhood which they deserve.
I think one friend in particular comes to mind, and her parents were so nasty to each other, and it was so full on, and it really, really influenced how she felt about her dad. And I remember us having a conversation, and she was just totally wrote him off. And I said, you only get one chance, because my dad had died at this point. And I said to her, I don't have the chance to tell my father what I thought of him, because he died before I got the chance. But you have that chance. You know, if whatever happened between you all when you were children, you're an adult now, and you get to decide how you want to interact with him now. And you get to have whatever conversation you want. Hopefully he's willing. And anyway, so she did end up having a conversation with him, and they did forge a relationship. And I said, just tell him. If you think he did a crap job, tell him. Like you're allowed to say those things to him. You know, you remember the kind of person you want to be, but now it's judgment day, and he's an adult, and he can handle it. And if he can't, that's not really your problem. You know,
that's right.
It's your journey. Get it out. Tell him. And anyway, she did end up telling him. But I remember it was really, really difficult for her because they were so nasty to each other. You know, the things that they said to each other. And the hurt, the absolute hurt.
And it hurts the children. It hurts children so much to be exposed to that. And they're so confused, and they're helpless. And it leaves emotional scars. I'm so glad she ended up taking the opportunity to talk to him, because this becomes intergenerational. It moves from generation to generation to generation. And only we can stop it from happening in our own families and say, it's stopping here. I'm going to parent differently. I'm going to handle conflict differently. And I'm going to teach my children different role models.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of, I feel like if you're going to be a parent, that's the journey, right? You're expanding as you're being a parent because there's so many challenges. I'm not a parent yet, but, I feel I often think about this, like, why do people have children, right? It's our journey just as much as their journey. And if you're not willing to kind of take on all that emotional labor, because it really is, then, maybe it's not.
It's sad that too many people become parents just because it's a biological thing that they do, rather than thinking about the awesome responsibility it is to be raising another human being and without harming them emotionally and psychologically. Life is tough. Life is challenging. Even in the best of families, no one gets away unscarred from life.
Yeah.
And you want to give your children, arm them with high self-esteem and great values, and they learn from their parents. So it's an awesome responsibility. Too many people don't understand what they're doing and the impact they're having on their children. And that's why there are so many adult children of divorce who are very emotionally scarred and very angry at their parents. And I always talk to clients about giving their children the happy ending that I had in my own family. It's possible, but you have to work on it every day and be mindful about every decision you make. That's the key. Ultimately, after I founded the Child-Centered Divorce Network, I turned this into an ebook with fill-in-the-blank templates so parents can customize the message to their family, the number of kids they have and the ages and all of that important information. But the bulk of the text I've written, so they just can tweak it here and there in places and then download it and put it into a photo album with their own family photos. And now, of course, it's all digitalized. And so it becomes a beautiful storybook again that the kids can read over and over again. And it becomes a script during this difficult conversation, because it's one of the most difficult conversations any parents will ever be having in their life, is breaking divorce news to the children. So it's a crutch and a resource that they can depend on to ease the process and get them prepared. And it's been working very well. This has been 15 years that it's been available now.
Yeah, it's such an incredible tool to just really help parents communicate that to their children.
Thank you.
I when I first heard you talk about this, I just thought it's just so genius, because kids do love looking at photos of themselves. Yes. And they love hearing stories before they could remember. And so, exactly. Okay, I think the key to what you're saying here is that you were on the same page with your now ex-husband, and you presented the story in a particular way together, and then you both continued on that story individually, and you didn't say anything bad about the other person. Yes.
And when parents get this message beforehand, because the ebook has 6 psychotherapists who participate, and we all share the same message about how important it is not to make the mistakes I discussed earlier, and to be on the same page as much as possible. It keeps a lot of parents who were thinking of being more cantankerous to say, wait a minute, this isn't the best thing for our long-term outcome of our family. Right. Because the family exists long after the divorce is going to end one day. It's a piece of paper. But your life as co-parents is going to be forever. For the rest of your life, you're going to be co-parents to those children. And you have to have a long-term strategy of how you're going to get along, how the kids are going to get along with you, and looking forward to happy days ahead, wonderful experiences in schools and graduations and marriages and grandchildren and all of those things that happen in life. We want everyone in the family to still have those experiences, even if you're coming with a new partner that you've married.
Let's talk about some healthy examples of co-parenting first, and then I want to ask some questions about what happens if we're already in a not so great position. But let's talk about what is healthy co-parenting look like? So we've talked about what negative things are, and now what's positive.
Yes. So healthy co-parenting, it means pick your battles. You can't micromanage your co-parent's life. And it's very tempting to want to get involved and know everything your co-parent fed the kids and the discipline and what time they put them to bed and all of those things. It's tempting to ask those questions, but it may not be the questions that the two of you are able to talk to each other about, depending on the relationship you have. And if not, then you have to stop and pick your battles. If it isn't something that's dramatically affecting the health and immediate well-being of your child, learn to let go of things and learn not to be so quick to get involved in the minutiae of day-to-day life, because it's imposing and it's disrespectful, and you don't want it when someone does it to you. Also, catch your ex doing something right and acknowledge and thank them, just like you want to do that with your children. It's really helpful if you have a criticism or a comment to start by saying, thanks a million last week for picking the kids up an hour earlier than you needed to. It really made a big difference for my schedule. I really appreciate it. I'll be happy to do that for you next time. And then go into the issue that may be troublesome for you, but find ways, little things that you could say and do, and be cooperative and flexible, because co-parenting is a lifelong experience. Everyone's going to need favors. No one can live by a parenting plan and rules and have a life that's not affected by illness and accidents and unexpected things that happen at work and all of the other things that life brings. So you want to be accommodating. And if you say, yes, sure, I'll swap weekends with you, or I'll do this or that, they're more likely to do the same thing for you. And then you're having a cooperative co-parenting relationship that's realistic and flexible. And you're not going to court every 6 months because of some silly indiscretion or change of plans. You've got to think in the long term, and you have to treat each other with respect and dignity if you expect it in return. So many co-parents start embattled, and it's very hard to undo that relationship. That's why I highly recommend avoiding litigation. I highly recommend avoiding cutthroat attorneys who are just out there to kill the other party, and to work with child-centered professionals. And I have a directory on my website of vetted child-centered professionals, attorneys and mediators and other professionals who really do care about the well-being of the family and the children especially. It makes all the difference in the world. So put yourself in your ex's shoes when you're making these plans. Think about what's going to aggravate and frustrate them, and try to avoid those things, because it just makes life simpler and easier the fewer battles you have. And listen to your language too, your communication skills, pointing the finger and using "you always" kind of language versus "I'm feeling hurt, I was upset when." There's a difference when you're using I language and talking about feelings,
right,
than when you're using you language. And one more point is always talk about the kids rather than you.
Right.
So if you say, little Johnny was upset and crying, and I wanted to talk to you about what happened, it's a lot different than saying, I'm upset about Johnny. So if you're starting by making the children the focus of the conversation, you're more likely to get a response that's respectful. And bring in the schools and the guidance counselors and any other support systems that you have that are professional and conscious and wise, not people who are getting you to take sides and be more cantankerous with one another. Listen to people who really are mindful in the advice they're providing for you.
How can we find resources that can help us through this process? I mean, obviously you're a wealth of resource. So what if you're not in our area, or if we need someone to help us like yourself? How do we know who to reach out to?
Well, first of all, Child Centered Divorce Network is international. So I don't work on a local level. I work nationally and internationally. So if you go to childcentereddivorce.com, there's a free ebook right on the home page. There's a load of hundreds of articles about every facet of this topic. And I also have several resources on co-parenting effectively, anger management for co-parents, breaking the divorce news to the kids, lots of other resources, as well as a free directory of experts. So if you're looking for someone who is child-centered, just go to our expert directory and you'll be able to look there. They're all over the world, and all wonderful people who I know really care about the family dynamic. There's also lots of other wonderful organizations now that are supporting divorce in a positive way. You could tell very quickly if you're reading or on a website of people who are into this belligerent, I'm going to win at all costs, let's get the other person. And when they're talking about win and lose in a divorce equation, something is off, because there is no winners and losers in divorce. You want to create the most fair and equitable, positive, harmonious outcome you can. And so you don't want to look for winning or losing, because the kids are the ones who lose when parents are doing that. So any resource you go to, if they're talking about the children and family and protecting the children, then you know that they're in the right mindset. And that's the most important thing that they can do, is give you advice that's respectful about the children's well-being. When the kids are put first, the other decisions all fall into place because they're going to be conscious, and that's what we're looking for. So you can Google lots of resources on family divorce and children. There's wonderful books and courses and programs out now, and it's a much better time to be getting a divorce because of that. The support system is much better, and of course, divorce groups, divorce coaching, divorce therapy, all of that makes all the difference in the world in getting professional support and guidance, so you don't feel that you're going through this alone, because you don't have to be.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate for therapy. I just cannot talk about it enough. I think it's so important for everybody, and we all can use some support. No one's got it all figured out.
I agree.
Yeah, awesome. Rosalind, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. I think what you do is incredibly important, and thank you for changing the lives of so many children.
Thank you. I enjoy talking with you. Thank you.
Can you just mention the name of your website one more time for everybody?
Yes. Child-centered with an ED, divorce. Child-centered divorce has it all.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love Podcast, the podcast about love, sex, and relationships. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, and find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.